Marcus Chen's Honda Civic hummed through the pristine streets of Cascade Heights, where every mansion competed for architectural dominance and the air itself seemed filtered through wealth. The classical piano concerto playing through his ancient speakers, actual speakers, not neural audio, felt like an act of rebellion in a neighborhood where everyone streamed consciousness-curated soundscapes directly into their temporal implants. He didn't have an implant. That was rebellion too, though his family interpreted it as poverty. The dashboard display flickered, a reminder that the car's AI was 15 years out of date and struggling with the neighborhood's quantum traffic grid. Marcus didn't mind. He'd learned to read traffic the old-fashioned way, through observation and intuition, skills his students at Westside Community College found quaint and occasionally fascinating. Like teaching them to mix actual paint instead of generating art through thought interface. Like insisting they look at physical canvases instead of retinal projections, the Chen family estate materialized ahead, a monument to his mother's 3 decades building the most successful luxury vehicle empire on the West Coast. Autonomous vehicles lined the circular driveway, each worth more than most people earned in 5 years. They were perfectly aligned, their chrome surfaces reflecting the November sun in coordinated patterns. Even the parking was a performance of wealth. Marcus's Civic, with its manual steering and visible scratches, would look like a beggar at a coronation. He parked at the far end, near the service entrance. Not because anyone asked him to, but because the small mercy saved everyone the discomfort of acknowledging the disparity. Inside, the house smelled like catered perfection, rosemary, roasted something, the faint ozone scent of climate optimization systems working overtime. The Thanksgiving table stretched impossibly long, set with china that had been in Catherine Chen's family for generations, back when having physical heirlooms meant something. Now everything could be fabricated, replicated, blockchain authenticated. But Catherine kept the old plates. The heavy silver, the crystal that caught light and threw it across walls. Marcus had always loved that about her. His mother sat at the head of the table, smaller than he remembered from last year. Catherine Chen at 68 was still elegant, tailored silk tunic, her silver hair styled in a way that suggested effortlessness while requiring considerable effort, but there was a transparency to her now, as if she were slowly becoming light itself. She saw him and smiled, genuine warmth flooding her features. That smile had always been his compass. Victoria spotted him next. His older sister had perfected the art of the entrance even when she was already in the room. She turned from her conversation with her husband James. And her expression shifted through several calculated phases, surprise that Marcus had actually come, assessment of what he was wearing, and finally a kind of performative delight that never quite reached her eyes. Marcus. You made it. Victoria's voice carried across the room, designed to draw attention. Her Armani suit was this season's neuro-responsive fabric, shifting subtle patterns based on her biometrics, currently displaying confidence with an undercurrent of something sharper. I wasn't sure you could afford the gas. Do they still use gas in those antique models? She was 3 glasses into an expensive Pinot Noir. Marcus could tell from the slight elongation of her vowels. The way she held her glass like a scepter. Victoria drunk was Victoria with the filter removed, which meant the commentary would start early and escalate. Still teaching finger painting to teenagers, she continued, moving closer. James remained seated, his attention divided between his phone and the neural feed displayed on his designer contact lenses. He was probably working. James was always working, even at family dinners, especially at family dinners. Brandon looked up from the bar, where he'd been mixing something complicated and unnecessary. Marcus's younger brother was 36 and looked like he'd been assembled by an algorithm designed to maximize executive presence. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, a Rolex that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a year, though the real flex was that it was mechanical, vintage, deliberately impractical. Rich people bought smart watches. Wealthy people bought antiques. Come on, Vic. Marcus teaches art appreciation. Totally different from finger painting. Brandon crossed the room in long, confident strides and clapped Marcus on the shoulder. The gesture was designed to seem affectionate while establishing physical dominance. How's the nonprofit salary treating you, brother? Still in that studio apartment in the up-and-coming neighborhood, Marcus had learned long ago not to react. Reaction was what they wanted, what they needed to confirm their narrative. Instead, he smiled, the expression easy and practiced. 2-bedroom, actually. And the neighborhood already came up. I just liked it before it was expensive. The truth was more complicated. His apartment in the arts district was modest, exposed brick, temperamental heating, neighbors who were artists and activists and immigrants building new lives. But Marcus had watched property values quintuple in 8 years. The vintage abstract painting hanging in his living room, inherited from a mentor, was worth $600,000 at last auction. He'd never sell it. The Bloomberg Terminal subscription on his ancient laptop cost $24,000 a year, which he paid without blinking because information was the only luxury he truly valued, and the bank account. The bank account that Victoria and Brandon knew nothing about, that held $47 million in liquid assets from a student who'd become a billionaire and insisted on sharing his success, but they didn't know. Nobody knew. Catherine reached for his hand as he sat beside her. Her fingers were cold despite the perfectly regulated temperature. "Thank you for coming early to help set up, sweetheart." "Of course, Mom." He'd arrived 3 hours early, as he always did, and helped Maria, his mother's housekeeper, with the table settings while they talked about her daughter's college applications. Maria's daughter wanted to study art history. Marcus had already written her a recommendation letter. Victoria's voice cut across the moment like a scalpel. "We would have helped, but some of us had actual work emergencies. Not everyone can leave at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday." Marcus bit back the obvious response, that he'd arranged his teaching schedule specifically to be available, that flexibility was one of the benefits of not chasing corner offices and vice presidencies. Instead, he squeezed his mother's hand and said nothing. The meal was an exercise in controlled tension. Brandon talked about his company's latest acquisition, the expansion into neural interface advertising, the yacht he was considering. Victoria discussed a case involving autonomous vehicle liability, her firm's new AI-assisted litigation platform, the vacation home in New Zealand that had the best bunker infrastructure for when things inevitably collapsed. James contributed occasional affirmative sounds. Catherine listened with the patience of someone who'd heard these performances many times before. Marcus mostly stayed quiet, answering when addressed, deflecting when his siblings tried to pull him into their game of comparative success. He'd learned that the less he said, the more they revealed about themselves. Halfway through the main course, Victoria leaned forward, the wine making her bolder. "Marcus, serious question. Don't you ever want more? I mean, you're smart. You could do something significant with your life." There it was. The central thesis of their relationship with him. That his choices represented failure rather than deliberation. That happiness without wealth was delusion. "I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing," he said evenly, teaching teenagers about dead painters in a community college. Brandon said it like the words themselves were embarrassing. "Come on, man. You could at least move to a university. Get some grants. Publish something. I like where I teach. The students need someone who cares about them as people, not just as resume lines." Victoria laughed, sharp and sudden. "God, you're like a saint or something. Saint Marcus of the art supplies and low expectations." Catherine's fork clattered against her plate. The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. "That's enough." Her voice was quiet but absolute. Catherine Chen had built an empire on the ability to make people listen when she spoke softly. Victoria had the grace to look ashamed. Brandon studied his wine glass. James finally looked up from his feeds. Catherine stood, wavering slightly, and Marcus half rose to steady her. She waved him off with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I need to tell you all something," she said. "I've asked you here today for more than just Thanksgiving." The room went still. Marcus felt the shift in atmosphere, the sudden attention that comes when people sense something important approaching. "I've been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer." Catherine delivered the words like facts, which they were, but facts that restructured reality around them. "The doctors give me 6 months. Maybe 8 with aggressive treatment." Silence. Complete and absolute, then chaos. Victoria's face went white, then red. She grabbed her phone immediately, fingers already moving. What doctors? Who gave the diagnosis? We need second opinions. Third opinions. Specialists. Brandon was on his feet, calling his assistant. Cancel tomorrow. Clear my schedule for the week. I need research on pancreatic cancer treatment, best hospitals, experimental protocols. They were doing what they did best. Throwing money at problems, building action plans, converting emotional complexity into logistical challenges they could solve through resources and connections. Marcus stood and moved to his mother's side. He didn't say anything. He just took her hand and held it, and when she leaned into him, he wrapped his arms around her and let her shake with silent sobs while his siblings coordinated their response in the next room, voices rising with plans and strategies and desperate attempts at control. Later, after the crying had subsided and his mother had retreated upstairs, Marcus found himself in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, an actual dishwasher, not a molecular cleaning unit, because Catherine preferred the ritual of it. Victoria appeared in the doorway, having composed herself into her professional persona. Obviously you can't be her primary caregiver, she said without preamble. You're working. You have students. We'll hire the best 24/7 nursing staff money can buy. Around-the-clock care, top specialists, whatever she needs. Marcus kept loading plates, the warm water running over his hands. I want to be there, Victoria, and we'll visit when we can. Mom needs professionals, not. She stopped herself, but the sentence hung unfinished in the air between them. He turned off the water and faced her. Not what? Not her son. Victoria's jaw tightened. Not someone who's going to bring his grading papers to her bedside and pretend that's the same as actual medical support. She needs the best care, Marcus. The absolute best. That requires resources and coordination and love? He said it quietly, without accusation, but Victoria flinched anyway. Don't you dare. Her voice dropped to something dangerous. Don't you dare make this about who loves her more. I'm talking about practical realities. You can't afford the kind of care she needs. We can. Let us handle this. Marcus dried his hands on a towel, taking his time. I'll be there, Victoria. Every day. I'm rearranging my teaching schedule. I'm going to be with her. That's not practical, no, he agreed. It's not. He left her standing in the kitchen, her perfectly composed exterior starting to crack, and drove home through streets that had started to glow with their evening optimization cycles. The city pulsed with controlled light, algorithms determining the most aesthetically pleasing color temperatures for each neighborhood's demographic profile. His apartment was dark when he arrived. He didn't turn on the lights immediately. Instead, he stood in the doorway and let his eyes adjust, watching the familiar shapes emerge from shadow, the second-hand furniture he'd carefully chosen, the books stacked on every surface, the abstract painting that most people assumed was a reproduction. Marcus moved to his desk and opened the laptop, waiting for the ancient machine to boot up. The Bloomberg terminal loaded slowly, cascading green text that represented real-time market data most people accessed through neural interface but that he preferred to read the old way. There was something honest about seeing information on a screen, outside your head, where it could be questioned. His portfolio loaded. 47 million in diversified investments, growing at a rate that would make him uncomfortable if he thought about it too long. Money he'd never asked for, never expected, from a student who'd insisted on repaying a debt that Marcus didn't think existed, David Kim. 17 years old and 3 weeks from suicide when they'd met, the memory came unbidden, Marcus staying late at the community college on a Friday night, cleaning up after his introductory painting class, when he'd heard someone in the computer lab down the hall. He'd found David there, coding something complex, tears streaming down his face while his fingers never stopped moving across the keyboard. They'd talked for hours. Marcus hadn't tried to fix anything or offer platitudes. He'd just listened, and then he'd asked to see what David was building. The app was remarkable, a social platform designed to connect people through shared creative projects rather than performative identity. Marcus had seen the potential immediately, had seen David's brilliance even as the kid insisted he was nobody, that his ideas were worthless, that nobody cared. Why do you care? David had asked finally, exhausted and suspicious. I'm nobody. Marcus had looked at him for a long moment, this brilliant, broken kid who couldn't see his own value. You're not nobody to me. And you won't be nobody to yourself once you see what you're capable of. He'd spent months mentoring David after that, helping him refine the app, writing recommendation letters for competitions, even lending him money for entry fees that Marcus could barely afford at the time. Not because he expected anything in return, but because talent wasted was a tragedy, and David Kim was too talented to lose to despair. 5 years ago, David had walked back into Marcus's classroom. 20 years old, transformed, confident, healthy, wealthy beyond imagination. His platform had gone public. He was worth billions. He'd slid papers across Marcus's desk. 2% equity. Non-negotiable. You saved my life, Mr. Chen. This is yours. Marcus had tried to refuse. David had been adamant. Just don't change, okay? Don't become what everyone else becomes when they get money. So Marcus had accepted the gift and promptly done nothing with it. He'd kept teaching. Kept his apartment. Kept his life exactly as it was, because that life made him happy, and changing it felt like admitting that his siblings had been right all along, that money was the measure that mattered. Now, sitting in his dark apartment after watching his mother announce her death sentence, Marcus finally let himself feel the weight of it. The exhaustion of maintaining his secret. The loneliness of letting his family believe he was failing when he was actually wealthier than any of them. The strange guilt that came from having resources he'd never earned through his own work, even as those resources gave him the freedom to do work he loved. He pulled out his phone and texted his mother, "I'll be there tomorrow morning." And every morning after, the response came quickly, despite the late hour, "You don't have to do that, sweetheart, I want to." A long pause. Then, "I know." Marcus closed the laptop and finally turned on the lights. The apartment materialized around him, humble and comfortable and exactly what he'd chosen. In the morning, he'd talk to the department head about redistributing his classes. He'd rearrange his entire life to be present for his mother's final months. His siblings would judge him for it. Would see it as more evidence of his lack of ambition, his failure to prioritize properly, his inability to let professionals handle things that required resources. They would be completely wrong, and he would let them believe whatever they needed to believe, because some things mattered more than being right. Some things mattered more than money. And Marcus Chen had enough money to know exactly how little it mattered in the end. He stood at his window, looking out at the arts district below. The neighborhood hummed with creative energy even at this late hour, musicians carrying instruments, artists hauling canvases, poets arguing about line breaks in the 24-hour cafe on the corner. These were his people. This was his wealth. Tomorrow he would begin the vigil. Tomorrow he would show up for his mother the way his siblings never would, not because they didn't love her, but because they'd forgotten how to measure value in anything other than quarterly reports and social media metrics and the number of zeros in their accounts. Tomorrow the real test would begin, not of his patience or his resolve, but of whether he could maintain his secret while his family watched him sacrifice everything for a woman who was about to test them all in ways they couldn't possibly anticipate. Catherine Chen hadn't built an empire by being naive. And Marcus suspected his mother knew far more about all of them than she'd ever let on. The question was what she planned to do with that knowledge, and whether any of them were prepared for the answer. The first month of Catherine's dying happened in increments Marcus measured by the light. Morning light when he arrived at 7, winter sun cutting through the mansion's smart glass windows that adjusted their tint based on circadian optimization algorithms Catherine had long ago disabled because she preferred, she said, to feel the actual day. Afternoon light when he read to her, golden and slanting, catching dust motes that the house's filtration system should have eliminated but somehow never quite managed in her bedroom. Evening light when she finally slept, her breathing shallow and monitored by sensors that fed data to medical teams who adjusted treatment protocols in real time while Marcus just sat and held her hand. He'd rearranged his entire teaching schedule. His department head, a woman who'd been teaching art history for 30 years and understood that some things transcended syllabi, had helped him consolidate his classes into 2 intensive days. Tuesday and Thursday he taught from 8 in the morning until 9 at night, pouring everything he had into those hours so his students got the full value of his attention. The rest of the week belonged to his mother. Victoria came twice in those first 4 weeks. Both visits followed the same pattern. She'd arrive in the early evening, perfectly composed in whatever smart fabric suit her stylist had selected, and she'd spend 15 minutes in Catherine's room making small talk about weather and asking how she felt. Questions that had no good answers when someone was dying of pancreatic cancer. Then she'd retreat to the study, phone pressed to her ear, voice carrying through the house as she discussed quarterly projections and succession planning and the upcoming expansion of the dealership's autonomous luxury division. The second visit, Marcus found her in the study at 9 p.m., still on a conference call, Catherine already asleep upstairs. "I need to go," Victoria said into her phone, seeing him in the doorway. Family situation. "Yes, I'll have the briefing notes by morning." She ended the call and looked at him with something between defiance and guilt. She was already asleep. "I checked on her before I came down." "I know, I had to take this call, Marcus. There are 1,200 people depending on decisions we make this quarter. That's 1,200 families, 1,200 mortgages and college funds, and I'm not judging you, Victoria." She studied him, trying to read criticism where there wasn't any, and finding nothing seemed to frustrate her more than if he'd been angry. "Mom and I need to discuss the business. If something happens, Brandon and I need to know her wishes about succession. The dealership is worth $43 million. You can't just not have a plan." "Have you asked her what she wants to discuss?" "She's not thinking clearly." "The pain medication. She asked if we could watch TV together last time you brought this up," Marcus said quietly. "She specifically asked if you could just sit with her and watch something." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to protect her legacy, Marcus. I'm trying to make sure that everything she built doesn't fall apart because we were too emotional to have difficult conversations. Someone has to think practically." "You're right," he agreed, and watched her deflate slightly, the fight draining out when he didn't offer resistance. "You should talk to her about it. Just maybe not when you visit to see her. Maybe schedule a separate meeting for business." "I can't just schedule separate trips. My calendar is insane right now." Marcus didn't respond to that. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like accusation. Victoria gathered her things, phone, tablet, the quantum encrypted data drive that contained whatever secrets corporate lawyers carried. At the door she paused. "You're here a lot, every day. That's not sustainable. You have your own life. You're teaching." "I've made it sustainable." She looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw something move across her face, not quite envy, not quite regret, something more complex that disappeared before he could name it. "Well, thank you for being here." After she left, Marcus climbed the stairs to find his mother awake. Staring at the ceiling where the smart glass skylight showed stars rendered meaningless by light pollution and atmospheric processors. "She means well," Catherine said without looking at him. "I know, she's scared." "I know that too." His mother turned her head, and in the dim light she looked almost like herself before the cancer, strong and perceptive and quietly amused by the chaos of human behavior. "You've always been the generous one. Even when you were small. Brandon would hoard his Halloween candy for months. Victoria would trade hers for things she wanted more. You'd give yours away to kids who didn't get as much." "I didn't like candy that much." "You liked making people happy more." She reached for his hand. "That's not a weakness. Whatever your siblings think, they don't think it's a weakness. They don't think about it at all." Catherine laughed, the sound rough and painful. Fair point. Brandon's approach to his mother's dying was more distant but equally revealing. He sent gift baskets, elaborate affairs from expensive boutiques, filled with gourmet foods Catherine couldn't eat because everything made her nauseous, flowers she was allergic to because nobody had updated the gift service's preferences since before the diagnosis, wine that interacted badly with her medications. The cards were signed in handwriting that belonged to his assistant, a detail Marcus only confirmed when one arrived with "from Brendan" spelled incorrectly. When Marcus called him about it, Brandon sounded distracted. "The assistant handles those. I told her to send something nice weekly." Is Mom not liking them? She can't eat most of it. And she's allergic to lilies. A pause. I didn't know that. It's been true her whole life, Brandon. Well, I'll update the preferences. Keyboard clicking in the background. How is she? Really, dying, Marcus said, because sometimes the truth needed to be that simple. I meant, is she in pain? Is the treatment working? She's dying, Marcus repeated. You should come see her. I will. Next week is insane with the product launch, but I'll clear some time the week after. He didn't come the week after. Or the week after that. Marcus stopped calling. Elena Rodriguez appeared on a Tuesday afternoon in early December, carrying a leather portfolio that was genuinely leather, not the biofabricated alternative everyone else used. She was 29, with dark hair pulled back in a way that was professional without being severe, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything while revealing nothing. Marcus Chen? She extended her hand. Elena Rodriguez, junior associate with Hoffman and Park. I'm here to review some estate documents with Mrs. Chen. Her grip was firm, her palm warm. Marcus found himself holding the handshake a moment longer than necessary before releasing it. She's upstairs. I can show you. He stopped because he'd heard it then, Catherine's laugh, the real one that had become rare enough to be precious. Actually, give me 1 second. He found his mother in bed, propped up on pillows, grinning despite the pain that never quite left her face. He'd been reading Pride and Prejudice to her, and he'd just gotten to Mr. Collins' proposal scene, and he'd been doing the voices, making Collins pompous and ridiculous and just desperate enough to be almost sympathetic. Don't stop, Catherine said. You were just getting to the good part. Mom, your lawyer is here, let her wait. This is important, so Marcus continued reading, making his voice absurd and formal as Mr. Collins explained all the rational reasons Elizabeth should marry him, and Catherine laughed even though it clearly hurt, and when he glanced at the doorway he saw Elena standing there, the professional mask she'd arrived with softening into something more human. He finished the chapter and closed the book. To be continued. You're cruel, his mother said. Leaving me on a cliffhanger. You've read it before. You know what happens. Yes, but I don't know what ridiculous voice you'll use for Elizabeth's refusal. Elena stepped into the room then, smiling. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry to interrupt. That was actually lovely. Catherine's eyes sharpened with interest. Elena Rodriguez. Charles mentioned you'd be coming. Marcus, this is Charles Hoffman's new junior associate. Elena, my son Marcus, who was just proving that community college teaching is wasted on him when he could be on stage. Art appreciation is performing, Marcus said. Just with a smaller audience and worse pay, he excused himself while they worked, going downstairs to make tea even though the house's automated kitchen could have done it faster and more precisely. But Catherine liked tea made by hand, claimed she could taste the difference even though Marcus suspected it was psychological. Still, if psychological comfort was all he could offer, he'd steep the leaves himself. When Elena came down 20 minutes later, he had tea waiting, 2 cups, because hospitality was instinct and he'd heard her footsteps on the stairs. You didn't have to, she said, but she took the cup, wrapping both hands around it despite the house's perfect temperature regulation. Old habit. My mom raised us to offer tea to guests. She's remarkable. Elena settled into one of the kitchen chairs, and Marcus noticed she chose the one that faced the window rather than the one that faced him, as if she needed to look at something other than another person for a moment. I've been doing estate work for 6 years. You see a lot of families in crisis. This is different. How so? Usually everyone's here. Hovering. Fighting over details. Making sure they're mentioned, that they're getting what they think they deserve. She glanced at him. You're here a lot. She's my mom, your siblings aren't. Marcus cradled his own cup, feeling the warmth seep through ceramic. They're busy. Elena studied him over the rim of her tea. You're a teacher, right? At the community college, art appreciation and introductory painting. Nothing fancy, and you're not too busy? There was no judgment in her voice, just genuine curiosity that felt more dangerous than criticism. Marcus took a moment before answering, because the truth was complicated. I made myself not busy. Some things matter more than others. What year of Pride and Prejudice were you doing up there? The shift in topic caught him off guard, which might have been intentional. What? The voices. You sounded like you'd been doing them a while. Like you'd developed characters. We started reading it 2 weeks ago. Mom picked it. She said she wanted something with a happy ending. Elena's expression shifted, something painful moving behind her eyes. She stopped, recalibrated. That's really lovely. She pulled a business card from her portfolio and slid it across the table. Professional, appropriate, with contact information printed in elegant sans serif font. But when Marcus picked it up, he noticed she'd written something on the back in pen, her personal cell number. Just in case you need to reach me outside of office hours, she said. For your mother. If there are questions or concerns, thank you. She stood to leave, and Marcus walked her to the door because that was also instinct, the kind of courtesy his mother had insisted on back when courtesy meant something other than letting algorithms handle social protocols. At the door, Elena paused. Your mother speaks very highly of you. Said you're the only one who loved art enough to teach it even though you could have. She stopped herself. Never mind. She's lucky to have you. Marcus watched her walk to her car, an electric sedan. Practical and efficient, the kind of vehicle someone bought when they cared about function over image. She glanced back once before getting in, and their eyes met across the driveway, and something passed between them that Marcus couldn't quite name but could definitely feel. He went back upstairs to find his mother smirking. She's pretty, Catherine said. She's your lawyer, junior associate. There's a difference. And she looked at you like you were interesting. Mom, what? I'm dying, not dead. I can still notice when someone notices my son. Marcus picked up the book. Should I continue, or do you want to spend your remaining time playing matchmaker? Why not both? But she settled back into the pillows, closing her eyes. Besides, you need someone. When I'm gone, you'll need someone. He read until she fell asleep, and then he sat there watching her breathe, the monitors tracking vitals that grew weaker every day, and he thought about Elena Rodriguez's card in his pocket and the way she'd watched him do ridiculous voices for his dying mother, and how that moment of vulnerability had felt more intimate than most of his actual relationships. 3 months in, Catherine called a family meeting. Getting all 3 of her children in the same room now required coordination that felt almost hostile in its difficulty. Victoria's calendar, Brandon's travel schedule, Marcus's teaching days all finally aligning on a Sunday afternoon in February. She'd grown thinner, more transparent, but her mind remained sharp in a way that seemed almost supernatural. The medication should have clouded her thinking, but if anything she seemed more focused, more perceptive, seeing through the performance of care to the motivation beneath it. They gathered in her bedroom because she couldn't easily leave it now, Victoria in the chair by the window, already checking her phone, Brandon standing because sitting suggested he planned to stay, Marcus on the edge of the bed where he'd spent most of the past 90 days. I've made a decision about the estate, Catherine said, her voice still carrying authority even when it barely carried across the room. I'm donating everything to charity. The mansion, the dealership, all the investments. It's going to cancer research and arts education nonprofits. The silence that followed had texture and weight. Marcus felt something a knot in his chest. He smiled, genuine and immediate. Mom, that's beautiful. Those organizations will change lives. Do you want help researching which ones align best with your values? He squeezed her hand, and over the next few days he brought brochures and websites, spent hours discussing different charities with her, which ones did the most good per dollar, which ones supported underserved communities, which ones would carry forward the values she'd built her life on. He seemed energized by it, excited about her legacy helping people who needed it most. Victoria's face had gone carefully neutral, the expression she used in courtrooms when opposing counsel said something outrageous. Mom, that's very generous. But have you really thought this through? I mean, what about family legacy? What about the people who've worked for you for decades? The dealership employs 300 people directly. What happens to them if? She stopped herself, visibly recalibrated. I just think we shouldn't make any hasty decisions. You're on a lot of medication. Maybe we should wait until you're thinking more clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, I just mean, let's table this. We can revisit in a few months when, I won't be here in a few months, Catherine said evenly. We both know that. Victoria stood abruptly, moved to the window, her shoulders rigid. Marcus watched his sister struggle with something, grief or anger or fear, maybe all three, and when she turned back her professional mask was firmly in place. I respect your decision, of course, Victoria said. It's your estate. But I hope you'll allow me to make sure the legal structure protects your interests and maximizes the charitable impact. Within 3 days, she'd consulted 3 different estate attorneys about mental competency standards. Marcus knew because one of them accidentally called his phone instead of Victoria's, asking for documentation about Catherine's medication schedule and whether her judgment might be impaired. He'd told them to contact his mother directly if they had concerns about her capacity. Brandon's reaction was more straightforward. He'd left immediately after the announcement, barely said goodbye, and when Marcus called him later that evening, his voice was flat and cold. What's the point? Brandon said. She's giving it all away anyway. I'm not going to sit there and pretend to be sad while she lights $43 million on fire. It's her money, Brandon, it's family money. It's supposed to stay in the family. That's what legacy means. Maybe legacy means something different to her. Yeah, apparently it means betraying everyone who helped her build it. A pause. You know what, Marcus? This is probably your fault. You're there every day, in her ear, probably convinced her that money is evil or whatever self-righteous bullshit you teach those kids. Marcus kept his voice level. I didn't convince her of anything. I support whatever decision she makes, of course you do. You don't need it. You've got your noble poverty and your teenager students and your moral superiority. The rest of us actually live in the real world where money matters, the real world where you haven't visited your dying mother in 6 weeks. Silence. Then the call ended. Brandon didn't visit again. Not in February. Not in March. His assistant continued sending gift baskets with increasing irregularity, until even those stopped. Catherine watched all of this with eyes that missed nothing. She'd created a test, Marcus realized, and her children had responded exactly as she'd predicted they would. The knowledge seemed to break her heart even as it strengthened her resolve. I'm sorry, he told her one night when they were alone. For what? That they're not who you hoped they'd be. Catherine smiled sadly. Oh, sweetheart. They're exactly who I knew they were. I just gave them a chance to prove me wrong. Elena's visits increased in frequency through February and March, officially to handle the complex legal work of establishing the charitable foundation. But the meetings stretched longer each time, and Marcus noticed the way her professional efficiency gave way to something more human whenever she was around his mother. She started arriving in the early evening, ostensibly because that was when Catherine had the most energy, but Marcus suspected it was also when Victoria and Brandon were least likely to be there. And Elena could drop the junior associate mask and just be a person in the presence of someone dying with unusual grace. 1 evening in late March, Catherine fell asleep early, exhausted from a difficult day, medications adjusted to manage pain that had become harder to control. Marcus and Elena found themselves on the mansion's terrace. The city spread below them in carefully orchestrated light, the night air processed to optimal temperature and humidity by atmospheric regulators that made even weather a commodity. She'd brought wine, good wine that she claimed was left over from a firm event but that Marcus suspected she'd brought specifically for this. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking and watching the city perform its algorithmic beauty. Can I ask you something? Elena said finally. And you can tell me it's none of my business. Shoot. Your siblings talk about the estate like it's their retirement plan. Like they've already spent it in their heads. She turned to look at him. You act like it doesn't exist. Either you're a saint or something else is going on. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time without the buffer of professional context or his mother's presence. She was beautiful in an understated way that became more apparent the longer you looked, and there was intelligence in her eyes that went beyond sharp to something more dangerous, the ability to see through the performance to the truth beneath. Or I don't need it, he said quietly. Elena moved closer, near enough that he could smell her perfume, Something subtle and expensive that she probably thought was too much of a splurge but wore anyway because she liked how it made her feel. Most people need money. Or think they do. I've learned that what I need and what I thought I'd need are very different things. And what do you need, Marcus Chen? The question hung between them, loaded with subtext neither of them was quite brave enough to name. He reached up, slowly enough that she could pull away if she wanted to, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away, right now, he said. I need to figure out if you're here as my mother's lawyer or if you've been finding excuses to drive across town 3 times a week for other reasons. Elena's breath caught, her pupils dilating slightly in the terrace lights. Would it be inappropriate if I said both? Probably. His thumb traced her jawline, and he felt her pulse jump beneath his touch. Is that stopping you? Not even a little. They kissed, and it was slow at first, careful exploration of boundaries they'd been dancing around for months, but it quickly became something more desperate, months of tension releasing all at once. When they finally broke apart, foreheads touching, both breathing hard, Elena laughed. Your mother's dying. Your family's imploding. And I'm your mother's attorney. This is the worst possible timing. Marcus pulled back just enough to see her face. Or the only timing that matters. Life's short. I'm learning that again. They started something that night that had no good name, not quite a relationship because the circumstances were too complicated. Not quite an affair because neither of them was hiding anything except from themselves. Stolen hours after Catherine slept, charged glances during estate meetings, text messages that started professional and became increasingly bold. One night in April, Marcus brought her to his apartment for the first time, and Elena saw his life up close in ways the mansion hadn't revealed. The modest furniture he'd carefully chosen from second-hand stores, the old car keys hanging by the door, the genuine simplicity of how he lived, but also the contradictions, the abstract painting on the wall that she'd seen in auction catalogs, the expensive wine he claimed a student had given him, the offhand mention of turning down a consulting opportunity that would have paid $200,000. Afterward, lying in bed with the city lights filtering through his window, she traced patterns on his chest and tried to assemble the puzzle of him. You're a mystery, Marcus Chen. How so? You live like a monk, but you're not poor, not really. You're not bitter. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just. She propped herself up to study his face. Content. Actually content. Do you know how rare that is? He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her, this unexpected gift in the middle of loss. Maybe I just figured out early what matters, and what matters, this. Being here. My students' faces when they finally understand perspective. My mom laughing at my terrible Mr. Darcy impression. You, looking at me like I'm not crazy for choosing this life. Elena kissed him deeply, and when she pulled back her eyes were bright. You're definitely not crazy. Different, but not crazy. They fell asleep tangled together, and for a few hours Marcus let himself forget about dying mothers and disappointed siblings and the secret that would eventually destroy or rebuild everything. By May, Catherine had declined to the point where hospice care moved into the mansion full-time. Marcus essentially lived there now, teaching his Tuesday and Thursday marathon sessions and spending the rest of his time in the chair beside his mother's bed, reading when she was awake. Keeping vigil when she wasn't. Victoria came once that month, bringing a lawyer, not Elena, a bulldog estate attorney with a reputation for winning competency challenges. They'd been in Catherine's room for 10 minutes before Marcus heard his mother's voice, weak but firm. Get out. He found them in the hallway, Victoria pale and shaking, the attorney looking uncomfortable. What happened? Victoria's voice was thick with tears she refused to shed. She said if we questioned her competency again, she'd leave everything to a cat shelter. The attorney tried to speak. Marcus cut him off. Leave. Both of you. Now, after they left, he went to his mother, who was crying silently. Exhausted and furious and heartbroken. I'm sorry, he said, because what else was there? They can't even pretend, Catherine whispered. Can't even pretend it's about me. 2 nights later, she was lucid in a way she hadn't been for weeks, the morphine dialed back enough that her mind was sharp even if her body was failing. Marcus sat beside her in the dim light of medical monitors and the moon through smart glass. "You knew I knew, didn't you?" she said suddenly. Marcus went still. "Knew what, Mom, about David Kim? About your money?" "Sweetheart, his father called the house 3 years ago, something about needing your signature for a stock split. He didn't realize I didn't know." The confession hung between them, years of mutual secret keeping exposed in a single moment. "I never told you," Catherine continued, "because I wanted to see what you'd do. If you'd change. And you didn't. You just kept being you." Tears streamed down her face. "Victoria and Brandon are so lost, Marcus. They think the money makes them successful, but they're miserable. You were already rich, and you chose finger-painting teenagers, art appreciation," he corrected with a gentle smile, "crying now too. Promise me something. When this is over, don't let them make you feel small. You're not the failure. They are. And they're going to learn that very soon," she made him promise. And he did, and they spent the rest of the night talking about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that only happens when time becomes finite and precious. Catherine Chin died the next morning at dawn, Marcus holding her hand, reading the final pages of Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth and Darcy finally understand each other, finally choose happiness over pride and prejudice and all the things that keep people apart when they should come together. He finished the last sentence, closed the book, and felt her go. In the silence that followed, Marcus sat holding his mother's hand, watching the sun rise through windows that finally seemed to be showing the actual day. And he thought about the test she'd created and the results she'd witnessed and the inheritance she'd left that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with truth. His phone buzzed. "Elena, texting, thinking of you." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stayed there watching light fill the room where his mother had died, and he prepared himself for what came next, the reckoning she'd orchestrated, the truth that would finally be told, the moment when his siblings would learn exactly how wrong they'd been about everything. The will reading was in 2 weeks. It was going to change everything. The holographic invitation had materialized in Marcus Chen's cramped studio apartment 3 weeks ago. Shimmering with that particular shade of blue that meant money, old money, the kind that bought you seats on the first commercial Mars flight and naming rights on orbital stations. His sister Victoria's face had smiled out from the projection, flawless as always, her words carefully chosen. Mother's 70th birthday gala. The Plaza Orbital. Formal attire mandatory. Please confirm attendance. The please had been a nice touch. Almost made it sound like he had a choice. Marcus stood now in the bathroom of his apartment, a 5th-floor walk-up in what the city's AI zoning system euphemistically called a transitional neighborhood, attempting to wrestle his dress shirt into something resembling presentability. The fabric was real cotton. He'd splurged on that years ago, back when he still thought these family events might matter, but the collar had a stubborn memory of being folded wrong, and no amount of steam seemed to help. Through the thin walls, he could hear his neighbor's entertainment feed blaring the evening news, something about the latest breakthrough in consciousness transfer technology, the anchor's voice breathy with manufactured excitement. He'd taken the afternoon off from teaching, which meant 23 community college students wouldn't get their lecture on how the pre-Raphaelites had revolutionized visual storytelling. The department head had been understanding. Though her eyes had done that thing they always did when Marcus mentioned his family, a quick flicker of calculation, wondering why someone from the Qin dynasty was teaching Art History 101 for 45,000 credits a year. The answer was simple, though nobody ever believed it. He liked it. His phone chimed. A text from his brother Brandon, sent from what the metadata tagged as the executive lounge at Qin Dynamics headquarters tower. "Running late. Save me a seat away from the ants. And try not to wear those shoes." Marcus glanced down at his shoes. They were fine. Comfortable. The sole on the left one was starting to separate, true, but that just meant they'd molded to his feet perfectly. He texted back a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. The shuttle ride to the Plaza Orbital took 40 minutes, the city falling away beneath him in layers of light and shadow. The other passengers were dressed for events like his, women in gowns that shifted color with their moods, men in suits woven with smart fabric that adjusted fit in real time. A couple across the aisle had matching neural interface ports behind their ears, the kind that cost more than Marcus made in a year, glowing softly as they communicated in whatever private channel their implants allowed. They looked happy. Or maybe just wealthy. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. The Plaza Orbital hung against the earth like a jewel, its transparent sections offering views that had probably inspired 1,000 proposals and twice as many divorce proceedings. Marcus felt the familiar lurch in his stomach as the shuttle docked, the artificial gravity taking over with a slight delay that left him momentarily weightless. A service android in the Plaza's signature silver livery directed him toward the Chen party's ballroom with the kind of deference that suggested his family had tipped well in advance. The ballroom was everything he'd expected, too large, too bright, too full of people whose net worth could fund small nations. Crystal chandeliers that were actually suspended in localized gravity fields cast prismatic light across walls that displayed real-time feeds of Earth turning below. The party was already in full swing, his mother's birthday having become less celebration and more exhibition, a chance for the family to remind everyone exactly where they stood in the city's carefully calibrated social hierarchy. Marcus spotted his mother immediately. Catherine Chen sat in a throne-like chair on a raised platform, unnecessary and vaguely feudal, but Victoria had probably insisted, surrounded by a court of well-wishers. She looked smaller than he remembered, her face carefully maintained by whatever rejuvenation treatments the family doctors recommended. But something in her eyes seemed tired. Their gazes met across the room, and she smiled. A real smile, not the society version. He started toward her. Marcus. Victoria materialized at his elbow, her hand on his arm, proprietary and warning all at once. She wore a dress that probably cost more than his yearly rent, its fabric embedded with micro-LEDs that created patterns of light across the deep blue material. Her neural interface gleamed at her temple, a custom piece from some exclusive boutique where they knew your genetic code before you walked in. You made it. And you wore the shirt. I own other shirts, She was already scanning the room, her attention fracturing across multiple inputs. He could see her eyes doing the rapid movement that meant she was reading messages on her interface while talking to him. Mother's holding court. You should wait until the first wave dies down. Brandon's networking with the Zhao family, you remember them, the atmospheric processors, and I need you to not embarrass us by talking about paint or whatever it is you do, art history, right? That. She squeezed his arm, and for a moment her attention fully focused on him. Look, I know these things aren't your scene, but it matters to Mother. And there are people here tonight who might be useful to know. The Caldwell woman is looking for board members for her education initiative. I could introduce you. I'm fine, Vic, you teach at a community college, I'm aware. She studied him with the expression she'd perfected in law school. The one that suggested she was cataloging weaknesses for future exploitation. You could do so much more. You have the name, the connections. Why do you insist on this performance of humility? Because it's not a performance, he wanted to say. Because I wake up happy. Because last week a student told me I was the first teacher who ever made her think she might be good at something, and that felt better than anything money ever bought. But he'd had this conversation with Victoria 100 times, and it always ended the same way, with her frustrated and him exhausted. I should say hello to Mother, he said instead. Victoria's interface chimed, her eyes flickering to some message only she could see. Wait. The Harrington contingent just arrived. Let me handle them first. 20 minutes. She was already moving away, her dress leaving trails of light in the air. Marcus found himself alone in a crowd, which was his default state at these events. He gravitated toward the bar, where at least he could occupy his hands with a glass and pretend to be engaged with something. The bartender was human, a luxury choice that suggested the event planner understood optics, and mixed him something amber and smoky without being asked. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else. The voice came from his left, warm and slightly amused. He turned to find a woman in a dark green dress that managed to be both elegant and understated. A rarity in this room. She had sharp eyes, the kind that suggested she missed very little, and a smile that looked like it knew several secrets. That obvious? Marcus said, "You're the only person in this room not checking your interface every 30 seconds. Either you're very confident or very disconnected." She extended her hand. Elena Morrison. I'm with Morrison and Associates. We're handling some estate work for the family. Her handshake was firm, professional, but her eyes stayed on his a moment longer than strictly necessary. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition he wasn't quite ready to name. Marcus Chen. I'm the family disappointment, really? She laughed. A genuine sound that made several nearby heads turn. You're going to have to try harder than that. I've seen the family tree. The competition's fierce. You've done your research, it's my job. Though I admit, you're an outlier. Art history professor at Northside Community College. No social media presence. No investment portfolio that I could find. You're either very good at hiding assets or you actually live on a teacher's salary. She sipped her own drink, some kind of wine that probably cost more per glass than Marcus's monthly transit pass. I'm betting on the latter. Should I be flattered or concerned that you've investigated me? Neither. Just intrigued. She leaned against the bar. And the subtle shift in her posture created a bubble of privacy in the crowded room, a sense that they were having a conversation separate from the performance surrounding them. What's it like, being the black sheep? Liberating, mostly. Sometimes lonely. He surprised himself with the honesty. There was something about her directness that bypassed his usual deflections. What's it like, being the person who helps families like mine navigate their dysfunction? Profitable. Often depressing. She gestured at the room with her glass. See that man by the window? Third marriage, all to women exactly 23 years younger than him. The woman in white talking to your mother? Fighting with her children over an inheritance neither side actually needs. The couple dancing? They haven't had a genuine conversation in years, but their social metrics are perfect, so they stay together. You're not a great advertisement for marriage. I'm an estate lawyer. By the time I meet people, all the romance is dead and we're just dividing the spoils. But her eyes were playful, contradicting her words. Though I imagine you're not the marrying type anyway. Too authentic for that kind of social contract, is that what we're calling it now? Authentic, among other things. She was definitely flirting with him. The realization came late, filtered through years of assuming women at these events saw him as the family eccentric, interesting the way a museum piece might be interesting. Your sister's trying to get your attention. Marcus looked up to see Victoria making sharp gestures from across the room, her expression suggesting he'd committed some social violation he wasn't aware of. I should go, probably. Elena didn't move. Though if you need an escape route later, I'll be here. Someone should drink all this expensive wine, and it might as well be us. I'll keep that in mind. As he walked toward Victoria, he felt Elena's eyes on his back, and the sensation was pleasantly unsettling. It had been a long time since someone looked at him like that, like he was interesting beyond his family name, like his choices made him more valuable rather than less. Victoria grabbed his arm the moment he was in range, her grip just short of painful. What were you doing talking to Morrison, having a conversation? Is that allowed? She's the estate lawyer, Marcus. Show some discretion. But Victoria's attention was already fracturing again, pulled toward a cluster of people near the platform where their mother sat. Come on. Mother wants to make an announcement. The room quieted as Catherine Chen stood, assisted by a nurse whose presence felt like an admission of something nobody wanted to acknowledge. His mother looked fragile in the sudden silence, the weight of 70 years and whatever treatments she'd undergone settling on her shoulders like a visible burden. Thank you all for coming, she said, and her voice was steady despite everything. It means the world to celebrate this milestone with family and friends. As many of you know, I've spent the past year putting my affairs in order. At 70, it's time to think about legacy, about what we leave behind. The room was perfectly still. Marcus could feel the collective attention sharpening, everyone calculating, everyone wondering. I've decided to donate my entire estate to charitable causes, Catherine continued. The mansion, the dealership portfolio, all of it. The Chin Foundation will be established to support cancer research and arts education. My attorneys will handle the details, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." The silence that followed was nuclear. Marcus watched his sister's face cycle through shock, denial, and fury in the space of 3 seconds. Brandon appeared at the edge of his vision, his expression carefully controlled but his hands forming fists. Around the room, guests pretended they weren't witnessing something spectacular, their interfaces suddenly fascinating. Victoria found her voice first. "Mother, this is something we should discuss privately. We've discussed it. The decision is made, but the family business will continue as it always has. This is about my personal holdings, Victoria. I'm allowed to do what I wish with my own money." Marcus felt the entire room's attention shift to him and his siblings, waiting for the reaction, hungry for it. This was entertainment better than anything their neural feeds could provide. He caught Elena's eye across the room, saw something like sympathy mixed with professional interest. "This is ridiculous," Brandon said, his voice too loud. "You're not thinking clearly. These medications, I'm perfectly clear, Brandon. Clearer than I've been in years." Catherine sat back down, and the movement seemed to cost her. "I've made my choice. Now you can make yours about how to respond." The party resumed, but the energy had shifted, become predatory. Marcus saw the guests clustering, sharing opinions through their interfaces, the social calculus already updating to reflect the Chin family's changed circumstances. He felt Victoria's fury radiating beside him like heat, saw Brandon stalking toward the exit, his perfect composure finally cracking. "This is your fault," Victoria hissed. "You've been filling her head with your poverty fetish nonsense. Making the rest of us look mercenary. I didn't know anything about this. Don't lie to me. You're the favorite. You've always been the favorite because you pretend not to care about money." "I don't care about money," she laughed, sharp and bitter. "Everyone cares about money, Marcus. Everyone. You just like feeling superior about not admitting it." She swept away, leaving him standing alone again. The party continued around him, but he was outside it now, marked. He thought about leaving, about catching the next shuttle down and returning to his apartment where things made sense. But something made him stay, some stubborn refusal to give them the satisfaction of driving him away. He found his way back to the bar. Elena was still there, as promised. "That was dramatic," she said, sliding a fresh drink toward him. "That's one word for it. Your siblings aren't taking it well, they'll contest it. Claim she's incompetent or I manipulated her." He drank, tasting smoke and earth. "Standard procedure. Is she incompetent? She's dying. Brain cancer, stage 4. But her mind's sharp as ever." He met Elena's eyes. "And I didn't manipulate her. I didn't even know she was planning this. I believe you." And strangely, he thought she did. "For what it's worth, I think it's brave." What she's doing, brave or cruel, maybe both. Elena shifted closer, and he caught the scent of her perfume, something subtle that didn't announce itself. "So what happens now? Now I go back to my life. Tomorrow I teach a class on Renaissance perspective. Next week we start the Impressionists. My students don't care about my family drama, and I don't bring it into the classroom. That simple, that simple." She studied him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "You really don't care about the money, do you? I've been watching you all night. Everyone else in this room is calculating, adjusting their strategies. You just look relieved, because I am. That's remarkable." She touched his hand, light and deliberate. "And probably going to make you very unpopular with your family." Already there, they talked as the party continued around them. About nothing important, her work, his teaching, the absurdity of orbital venues for birthday parties. It felt like a refuge, this conversation, a pocket of reality in a night designed to emphasize everything artificial. He learned she'd grown up middle class, worked her way through law school, still lived in a neighborhood where people knew their neighbors' names. She learned he'd been teaching for 8 years, loved it despite the terrible pay, couldn't imagine doing anything else. "I should warn you," she said eventually, "your sister asked me to evaluate your mother's mental state. Professional opinion on her competency. And And I'm going to tell her what I told your mother's other lawyers. Catherine Chen is completely sound. Dying, but sound. She finished her wine. I thought you should know. Thank you, don't thank me yet. This is about to get ugly. Your family has resources, and they're not going to accept this gracefully, I know, do you? She tilted her head, appraising. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's spent his whole life trying to stay out of the fight. But this time, you're already in it. Whether you want to be or not, she was right, of course. He could feel it already, the way the room had shifted around him, his siblings' fury creating a gravitational field that would pull everything into orbit around it. The next months would be brutal, lawyers, accusations. Family meetings where every word was a weapon, but beneath that, deeper than the dread, was something else. A small, stubborn satisfaction. His mother had made her choice, and it was the right one. Not because he agreed with leaving everything to charity, though he did, but because she'd refused to let her children's expectations dictate her final act. She'd claimed her agency, her right to surprise them all. I should find my mother, he said. Thank her, good luck. Elena's smile was warm, knowing. And Marcus? If you need someone to talk to during all this, someone who isn't family or their lawyers or trying to get something from you, I'm a good listener. That's a conflict of interest. Probably. But I'm finding I don't care as much as I should. She pulled out a card, actual paper, another luxury, and pressed it into his hand. Think about it, he found his mother still on her platform, the crowd around her having thinned. She looked exhausted, her skin pale under the chandelier's prismatic light. When she saw him, though, her face brightened. Marcus. Thank you for coming. He sat in the chair Victoria had vacated, took his mother's hand. It felt fragile, the bones prominent under papery skin. That was quite an announcement, overdue, really. I should have done it years ago. She squeezed his hand. Your sister is furious with me, she'll survive. Will you? This affects you too. The family dynamics, the tension. I know you hate these situations, I'll survive too. He studied her face, seeing past the treatments and the careful makeup to the woman who'd raised him, who'd never quite understood his choices but had defended them anyway. Why now? Because I'm dying, sweetheart. And dying gives you clarity about what actually matters. She looked out at the party, at the guests still networking and posturing, their interfaces glowing like digital halos. I built an empire. Your father and I, we created something that will outlast us both. But I look at Victoria, at Brandon, and I wonder what we actually taught them. How to make money. They already knew that. How to be happy. I don't think they've figured that out yet, and me, you figured it out early. That's why you've always been different. She touched his cheek, motherly and sad. You're happy, aren't you? Despite everything. Despite how they look at you, I am, good. Then I did something right. She settled back in her chair, tired. Go. Enjoy what's left of the party. And Marcus? Whatever happens in the next months, the legal battles, the family drama, remember that none of it matters. They can't take from you what you never wanted in the first place. He kissed her forehead and left her there, surrounded by her court of aging socialites and business partners. The party was winding down. Guests filtering toward the shuttle bays, already composing their social media posts about what they'd witnessed. He saw Brandon in a corner, deep in conversation with a lawyer whose interface glowed aggressive red. Saw Victoria holding court with a group of relatives, her body language sharp and militant. He didn't belong here. He never had. Elena caught him at the exit. Leaving without saying goodbye, it seemed appropriate, very mysterious. Very brooding. But she was smiling. I meant what I said. About talking. I have a feeling the next few months are going to be interesting. That's one word for it, here's another, inevitable. Your family's going to come at you hard. Marcus. They'll try to prove you manipulated your mother, that you're not as poor as you pretend, that you've been playing some long game. She stepped closer, and he was aware of the space between them, charged and deliberate. They might even find out you're not actually broke. That you've had money this whole time. His blood went cold. I don't. 8 years ago, a student of yours, David Kim, founded a tech company that went supernova. Gave you a significant equity stake as a thank you gift. She watched his face carefully. It's in the public records, if you know where to look. 47 million credits, current valuation. More than enough to buy your own orbital platform if you wanted. How did you? I'm very good at my job. And I was curious about you. She touched his arm, gentle. Don't worry. I haven't told anyone. But your siblings will find out eventually. Victoria's already hired investigators. When they do, this whole narrative collapses. The poor teacher, the family disappointment, all of it reveals itself as performance. It's not performance. The money doesn't matter, I know. And the way she said it, he believed she did. But they won't see it that way. They'll see betrayal. Deception. Everything they believed about you turning out to be a lie. What do I do? Tell them first. Control the narrative. Or don't, and let it explode on its own timeline. She shrugged. Either way, it's going to be spectacular. And I plan to watch from a safe distance with excellent wine. Some help you are. I never said I was helpful. I said I was a good listener. Her smile was wicked now, knowing. Besides, you don't need help. You've been winning this game the whole time. You just didn't realize you were playing. She left him there, at the threshold between his family's world and his own. Below, through the transparent floor, Earth turned in its eternal rotation, cities glowing like circuits, millions of lives unfolding in parallel. His phone buzzed, a message from his department head asking if he could cover an extra class next week. Another from a student who'd just discovered Frida Kahlo and wanted reading recommendations. Real life. His life. He sent quick responses to both, feeling the familiar satisfaction of being needed for what he actually did rather than who his family was. Tomorrow he'd go back to his 5th floor walk-up, to his classroom full of students who didn't know or care about chin money. He'd lecture about perspective and light, about how artists saw the world differently and invited others to see it differently too. But tonight, riding the shuttle down through layers of atmosphere, watching the city resolve from abstraction into concrete reality, Marcus Chin allowed himself to think about what came next. The legal battles. The family confrontations. The moment when his siblings discovered the truth and everything they thought they knew about him shifted into a new configuration. And beneath all that, warming him like a secret, the memory of Elena's smile, her knowing eyes, the way she'd looked at him like he was a puzzle worth solving. The apartment was dark when he returned, exactly as he'd left it. He made tea in his battered kettle, sat on his second-hand couch, and pulled out the stack of essays his students had turned in before break. Reading their thoughts on what art meant, what beauty was, what made something worth creating, it felt like medicine after the toxicity of the gala. His phone rang. Victoria's face appeared in the holographic display, and he almost declined. But something, curiosity, obligation, the knowledge that avoiding her only delayed the inevitable, made him answer. We need to talk, she said without preamble. About Mother. About what she's planning. About what you're going to do to stop it. I'm not going to stop it, don't be ridiculous. This hurts all of us. Including you. It doesn't hurt me. I don't need her money. Victoria's laugh was ugly. Everyone needs money, Marcus. Everyone. And you might play poor, but you're still a Chen. You're still entitled to your share. I don't want my share. Then you're either a liar or an idiot. Probably both. She leaned forward, her interface casting shadows across her face. We're fighting this. Brandon and I. We're going to prove she wasn't competent, that someone influenced her. And if you don't help us, we'll assume that someone was you. Assume whatever you want. I'm giving you a chance to be part of the family here. To stand with us, the family that's suing our dying mother, the family that's protecting our legacy. There's a difference. He could feel the old patterns pulling at him, the familiar dynamic where Victoria pushed and he retreated, where being the black sheep meant staying quiet to keep the peace. But something had shifted tonight. Maybe it was his mother's courage. Maybe it was Elena's knowing smile. Maybe it was just exhaustion with the whole performance. "I'm not helping you contest the will," he said quietly. "And if you drag me into this, I'll testify that mother was completely sound." Because she was. Victoria's expression went cold. "Then you've chosen your side." "I guess I have," she ended the call without another word. The silence that followed felt like relief. Marcus returned to his essays, losing himself in his students' voices. Outside, the city hummed its endless song, traffic and humanity and life continuing regardless of family drama or inheritance battles. Tomorrow would bring new complications. But tonight, in his modest apartment with his worn furniture and his stacks of art books, Marcus Chen was exactly where he wanted to be, and for the first time in years, he felt ready for whatever came next.